if you're leaving high school, you've finished high school and you're going directly into, let's say, construction, you're making money immediately.
Instead of college, a lot of these kids are learning how to become plumbers or electricians or cabinet makers or things that we need.
Or some of us podcasters.
Right. A lot of young people have been told, you've got to go to college. It's the only way to not have a terrible life. But a lot of these kids have gone, and they really ought not to have gone. And Gen Z's seen that. They've seen what has happened to their big brothers and sisters pretty much. And it's like, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
That's a terrible idea. We're going to go and get some real money.
Yep. So I guess college grad's going to go into something like a professional, white collar, tool belt generation grad is gonna go into more blue collar stuff. So we looked up median pay for new hires in construction versus professional services, which is basically blue collar versus white collar.
No, last year.
Hello and welcome to the Pop Culture Contrarian podcast with Thomas, Sterling, and Andrew.
Hello.
Hey there.
I have returned from my travels somewhere in the world on a beach.
Not Mars.
Not Mars. They were correct. If you watched last week's episode, they speculated that I would take a ticket to Mars, and they're correct. I wouldn't have to think about it. Elon came to me and said, hey, you want to go die on Mars? I'd be like, yes, I'm in.
All right, send a tweet to Elon.
But that's not our topic today. Unfortunately, it's not about going to Mars. Our topic today is the tool belt generation and the evolving world. So, Andrew, I think you kind of put us onto this, right?
Yeah, Generation Z. Mm-hmm. We have kind of a new trend that we're seeing. Mike Rowe talked about this a lot and kind of brought it to the attention of America.
Sorry, Mike Rowe, the dirty jobs guy. But you just said it, and I was like, Micro what?
Yeah, Micro. No, no. Mike Rowe is he's the dirty jobs guy, and for those who aren't aware, I would be shocked if anyone doesn't know who he is.
Mm-hmm. The Dirty Jobs was the name of the show, right?
Right, yeah.
I think it was a Discovery Channel.
It may have been Discovery Channel. So it was a Discovery Channel show where he would go around and find people doing all kinds of manual labor sorts of things.
The stuff that keeps, the electricity
the world
flowing
turning,
and
blue collar,
working.
The real essential workers of the world, and show people what their lives are like and kind of the opinions of, or the perception.
Kind of a makeover for those industries.
Yeah,
right.
Grant appreciation for something that.
And he's been talking about
for granted.
The movement in the direction of the trades for Generation Z. And instead of college, a lot of these kids are learning how to become plumbers or electricians or cabinet makers or things that we need.
Or some of us podcasters.
Right. This is definitely a blue collar trade.
Well, I just mean I didn't do the college, and I ended up, I did think about some of these blue collar trades. I thought about AC, air conditioning repair.
Sure.
But I wound up in podcasts, just like everyone else my age.
Well, I guess maybe the takeaway here is these young people are acquiring skills in different ways than going to a university. And today we're going to talk about what that kind of looks like.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll just start with my own experience. I graduated in 2012 and I was looking at college and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And college costs a lot of money, tens of thousands of dollars a year. And I was like, do I really want to go into debt for something that I'll figure out eventually? And I decided not. I did try AC repair and I learned a lot, but I never ended up going into that field. But it's definitely, the thought was there, find a job that's not going to expire because, I didn't know it then, but now AI's coming. It's going to replace a lot of programming jobs probably eventually and stuff like that you kind of thought were the jobs of the future. So it makes sense to try to find something you're going to do with your hands because it's going to be a while before the robots get there, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the cost of college has doubled in the 20th century. So
or the 21st century?
21st century, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, from the point where I graduated, it's now double what it costs.
It's ridiculous.
We're a quarter of the way in.
Yeah. This is true.
I know. And I think part of me thinks it is a needed correcting kind of change. You could say, well, the colleges have somewhat done this to themselves by being way too expensive.
Yeah.
And I understand the kind of the concept of, well, education, theoretically, specialized education, is going to make you a more valuable asset to a business or company.
And you have to draw these
more marketable
experts in their fields
Yes.
to your college to teach people.
Exactly. And so, but even the drive to go to college so that you can gain that information, what do they say? Knowledge is power.
Yeah.
You know, it's not and in fact, still your highest earners, generally speaking, outside of something like celebrities in sports, are going to be college graduates.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's true.
That's still,
But I
still
think
the
it's
case. But
it's not the diploma that makes the difference. It's the field you get the diploma in.
And it's-
If you become a
yeah.
doctor, you're going to make, 6 figures for sure.
right.
If
Lawyer,
you-
engineer, STEM.
If
Right,
you,
kind of stuff.
get your diploma in feminist dance theory, then you turn out to be a CRT, a DEI enforcer on a college campus, which you probably earn good money doing that too. But it's not a good job. Don't do that.
To that point, Sterling, I think that Gen Z is seeing a lot of what has happened to our generation, the millennial generation, where a lot of young people have been told, you've got to go to college. It's the only way to not have a terrible life. But a lot of these kids have gone, and they really ought not to have gone.
Yeah.
And they get a degree in a whatever thing because they don't know what they want to do and they don't have good direction. And maybe college just wasn't a good fit for them.
Yeah. Or they get a good degree and they just only barely squeaked by and didn't really learn anything.
Or maybe they don't even get the degree and then they
Right.
just have the debt.
Yeah.
And these different categories of things, they kind of were sold a bill of goods from society. Like, hey, you have to do this. This is the only way. And if you don't, you're going to live in poverty.
Yeah.
But it has not worked out that well for a lot of young people in the millennial, and Gen Z's seen that. They've seen what has happened to their, big brothers and sisters pretty much. And it's like, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
That's a terrible idea. We're going to go and get some real money.
Yep.
Yeah.
Speaking to that, we wrote down some numbers here in our prep for this. So I guess college grad's going to go into something like a professional white collar tool belt generation grad is gonna go into more blue collar stuff. So we looked up median pay for new hires in construction versus professional services, which is basically blue collar versus white collar.
Yeah, last year.
Last year, yes. And for construction, the pay rose 5.1% last year to $48,000 a year. And for professional services, it rose 2.7% to $39,000 a year. So in fact, it is the blue collar workers who are earning more money right off the bat.
Yeah.
Right. And you're starting, just logically speaking, if you don't have money in the first place to go to college and you don't have maybe you don't have the grades to get a bunch of great scholarships, then you're left with the kind of either the decision of taking out a bunch of loans or not going to college. And that second choice is looking a lot more attractive to a lot of folks because it doesn't mean that you're going to be poor or lower middle class for the rest of your life either. I think, the way finances work, I think you have to understand that if you start out small, that doesn't mean you're going to always end up small. It's all about kind of growing both your skill set, no matter what you're doing. If it's trades or if it's in white collar, you still have to be developing those skill sets. And the more skill sets you develop, the more money you can make, generally speaking. And if you're going into the trades, like they were saying there, if you're leaving high school, you've finished high school and you're going directly into, let's say, construction, you're making money immediately.
Yeah.
That's 4 years at least of making money that your buddy who goes to college and has to take out loans maybe maybe he's got a small side job or part-time job, but he's not really doing anything else other than using that money to basically survive while if you're making 40, almost 50 grand a year
as a new hire,
if you're smart with your money, you're putting a lot of that away and for the future and growing it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to be sitting in a lot better shape financially than your friend potentially after, $150,000 in loan debt at the end of 4 years.
That's what we call opportunity cost.
Yeah.
Funny, when my wife and I were in college, we were doing the math once about the amount that we were spending on college versus opening a liquor store.
So you opened a liquor store, right?
Should have.
Yeah.
Guess which one makes more money?
Yeah.
Liquor store.
Yeah. Well, what does it cost to get a liquor license, though? I mean, that's
I have no idea now.
Yeah.
I'd have to go back and look. But
Yeah.
There's a reason there's not liquor stores everywhere.
right.
Well, in the undisclosed beach location I was just at, I will say there were lots and lots of liquor stores.
There's
And
probably a lot of other stuff.
actually,
too.
while I was down there, I was browsing Reddit, which I always do, and I found this map of the drunkest and driest counties in the U.S. So dry being you
Yeah.
don't drink there. The drunkest counties are almost universally in Wisconsin. Apparently, the
Oh.
Wisconsinites, they like cheese
So they
and
live
they
up.
like booze.
They live
and
up
that's
to
what
their
they like.
reputation, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
It's a terrible place to live, so I can not blame
That's
them
how
too
they
much.
deal with those
And-
dark gray winters.
Exactly.
Thomas, you actually could guess the drunkest county in the nation because I think you've been there. I think you might have lived there.
Did I? I'm
I think it's the county for Bozeman, Montana.
Gallatin.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't understand that one. That actually surprises me because
Well, my buddy who did oil rigging up there, I think it was, said it didn't surprise him at all. They drank real hard.
Interesting.
really, I should ask my brother. He would know better than I would. I think
Yeah.
in that area.
So that's a complete tangent, but it's interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow.
All right. So you didn't open your liquor store, Andrew.
No, didn't open the liquor store. Just spent, I mean, between the both of us, probably somewhere in the vicinity of like 60 grand, which for two people in college, we got out all right. And we
Yeah.
ended up, we worked throughout our college and we ended up debt free
Nice.
on the other side of it. And it wasn't from people paying for it. It wasn't really from scholarships. It was just
Hard work.
hard work and being careful. But
Did you listen to Dave Ramsey?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. There you go. There
Yeah.
you go.
Yeah.
People love to hate on Dave Ramsey these days because he's just not realistic. But, he has a point, which is if you spend less money than you make, you end up better off.
yeah, that's for sure. So
Yeah.
ultimately, it worked out for us, but I would say I compare myself particularly to a couple of young people that I know who are doing infinitely better than me and didn't go to college. One in particular, a good friend of mine who he went and learned HVAC and got licensed and worked under a guy as an apprentice. And then he started his own company.
Nice.
And now he's got like 4 trucks and he's got multiple employees and he sponsors sporting events. And I don't know exactly how much he makes, but I know he didn't have time to talk to me anymore. So I think he's doing pretty well.
Yeah. You don't provide enough value per minute, Andrew.
No, right?
Which is crazy because we're the ones sitting here coming up with all the solutions to the world's problems. You'd think he'd want to listen to you.
Yeah, you'd think.
That's why you should listen to our podcast.
Yeah, his loss. Don't be like his successful ignorance. No, he's a good
Yeah.
guy.
Well, I think too, beyond just the financial considerations, which are important, but there is also the consideration of interest and skills. Not everybody's cut out to be at a desk.
Yeah.
Crunching
I
numbers.
think a lot of people aren't.
Yeah. I've known lots of people who are just good with their hands. And
Yeah.
they're good about mechanical stuff that just clicks for them.
Right.
And, why should they be learning how to break down English literature? Like, it's good for everyone to know a little bit about that, but you don't need to waste your time on it if you're going to be a rock star mechanic.
Sure.
Well, that's kind of what the concept behind the high school and public school, why public schools or schooling is mandated to go to effectively 18 or 12 years. The concept was this was the way to get people educated well enough to be contributing members within society so that they're not a drain on society and are actually helping society progress and work for everybody.
Assets.
And as hard as I usually am on the school system, and I will be once more in the future, but I think that largely has been a successful project.
Yeah.
The problem comes when you start debasing grades and you start passing people up who have not earned the advancement to the next grade.
Well, and that's probably the key here is there was that push especially I think in the 90s to get that college was the recipe to success. And so the more people we can get and that we can plow through college, the more successful people we're going to have. Right. Well, it's a nice theory, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's actually what's happening. And in fact, we have seen like you referenced, what was it? Women's study? No, what was it?
Feminist dance theory. That's the generic, stupid,
stereotype
career.
Well, like my dad's joke used to be, the degree in underwater basket weaving.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, they're worthwhile studies. I mean, we can use, you want to be an engineer, or you want to be a doctor, or the STEM side. And if you're just going for your basic Bachelor of Arts, I mean, there is theoretically, it's supposed to give you a well-rounded degree so that you kind of might not be in a specific field, but you have a skill set, almost like a Swiss Army knife, where you can kind of fit in to potentially a bunch of different,
My cousin's
in white collar
kind of splitting the difference here. He's actually doing the 4-year degree, but he's doing it to get into construction. And he eventually wants to start his own construction company.
Right. And so there's like business. Learning how to run a business is important. Now, some people, they have almost a natural bent toward it and can pick up things really easily. And in the digital age in which we live, you can educate yourself on YouTube. I mean, you don't know how to do something, look it up on YouTube. So there is a lot of free education out there.
Yeah. And especially if you're going to be a handyman, YouTube is perfect for that.
Makes all kinds of sense for that. And I think that having a necessary lane or means by which more people can get into the trades and are encouraged to do so and can make a good living doing so and find it very fulfilling is good and needs to be emphasized. And so I think that's when we're seeing this, generation tool belt, as they're calling Gen Z now, if it turns out to be that it is the case, that a significant percentage of them go into these trades, because we are seeing part of the reason it's so lucrative. We're seeing the boomer generation that has kind of owned the trades. Mm-hmm. They're retiring and they're having to pass the torch, and a lot of times there's not anybody to pass the torch to.
That's something I've heard people talking about, is specifically in things like shipbuilding or building aircraft and rocketry. A lot of the guys who know how to do it don't have someone to pass that knowledge on to, so we're losing our ability to manufacture some of this really high-tech stuff.
Yep. Yeah, that type of a knowledge deficit there's one thing to have it in books and in theory when you're sitting in a classroom, but it's entirely different to get it experientially. We're actually having to do this stuff.
Right.
And the trades especially are heavy on that. You have to do it.
Yeah, there's actual engineering or hands-on, and then there's theoretical. And
yeah.
Speaking of, did y'all know that Albert Einstein was a real guy? I always thought he was just a theoretical physicist.
We need to have one of those, Yeah,
push the little buttons like.
Sorry, I saw that one earlier, and I saw a way in, so I had to.
Okay.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I think, Thomas, it's an interesting observation. And I think the reason why that so many people are like the boomer generation, they don't have anybody to pass this on to is because of this stigma that has been labeled, society has labeled on blue collar, like you're a ditch digger, basically. And you're not.
That's where you go when you fail. That's kind of the stereotype.
That's the stereotype. And it's a terrible one because it's not true.
It's not true. And for lots of young men, one of their greatest assets is their strength.
Sure.
So you should capitalize on it while you have it. Don't, wear yourself out to the point you're useless when you get older. But while you're at that peak of strength, you should use it. You should find a way to get money out of it.
I think that's what Mike Rowe has been trying to do, really, is remove that stigma that we're seeing in America and emphasize this is good, it's righteous, it's necessary, and it is respectable.
Well, there's also just work is good. Just, I don't care what the work is necessarily, but work itself is good for the soul. We, as human beings, were created to work. Now, there's an element of toil in every work, and toil is frustrating because it's part of the reason why people don't want to work, because it can be difficult, it can be frustrating and taxing and all those things. But those who learn to be able to do it and hone their skills and develop and get better at it will find much greater enjoyment of it than those who try to avoid work.
Well, the return on investment will be higher than anything else they're going to do.
Yeah.
And it's just simple facts. that if you've worked hard that day, if you've really put in the effort and done what was needed from you that day, it's more fun to play at the end of the day after you've earned it.
Well, and also you can often get better sleep.
Right. That too.
Your body is ready for that bed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but we're also looking at a future where things are changing, technologically speaking.
And I think that's kind of what happened with millennials.
Yeah. I think maybe that's a good point. What do you think happened with millennials? Maybe expand on that.
So it was Andrew made me think of this a minute ago. Sorry, I know I'm always cutting people off. I can't help it. But you were talking about, we kind of stigmatize these labor fields where you're actually working with your hands in favor of white collar futuristic jobs, programming and stuff.
It's
and that's
thinker stuff, the white collar stuff.
Yeah. I think I, as a young man, was told we're going to need, people who know how to work with computers. We're going to need people who know how to do all these brand new fields that are just emerging. And that was true, but I think maybe too many people went that direction. We need a good, solid chunk of people who are going to learn how to do the things that we discovered 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago that are still necessary for today. And I think I think the millennials left a big deficit there, and maybe Gen Z is rising up to fill that. That'd be great.
Yeah, I think that's what's happening.
Yeah, to that point, I agree. I think that there also may have been kind of what you were saying there, Sterling, this expectation of technology being at a certain place, and therefore I need to try to cut it off at the pass, as it were, or be ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
And as often happens, the promises of what technologies, where it's going to do, or what it's going to provide, don't always meet the predictions.
Right.
And I think that, I think we've kind of done I'm wondering if we're doing a little bit of this with AI. Well, with AI, it's going to take care of this. We're not going to need burger flippers anymore because AI machines are going to do everything. And you just pull up and order a burger and there won't be anybody in there. The AI will do it all. Now,
newsflash, they do actually have AI taking orders now.
Well, is it AI or is it just computers? Because there's a difference. So there are already computerized McDonald's, I think, in places where there's basically no human staff there. But it's not ChatGPT running that. It's a different thing. It's just automated services mostly, I think, unless you know differently, Andrew.
Well, I may need to research it further, but my understanding is it is smart enough to understand nuance and the difference in the kinds of things that is being told to them.
Okay.
It's kind of like Siri, but actually.
So it sounds like it is a language model.
It is.
So it's a learning thing. And it's not to say that there aren't examples of these kind of like burger joints that maybe are going to be almost, you won't see another human being working at. When will that become the norm? Will it
probably still be a while if it does.
And so I think there's those kinds of things is what I'm talking about. There's kind of these expectations thrown out there like, well, pretty soon we're not going to need people working at these fast food restaurants because they're all going to be automated. And it's like, no, there might be some examples, but the fact of the matter is we still need a lot of people working at these restaurants. That's still how it works. And there might be other things that are coming that result from new technology coming into phase that we're starting to realize we're going to need this, or maybe an old job that wasn't as appreciated, not as much in the time past, suddenly becomes that much more important now.
I mean, I think I was told that the trucking industry would be dead and replaced by robo trucks by now. In 2014, people were worried about that. In a decade, who knows? There'll be no one employed in trucking anymore. It's still one of the biggest blue collar industries in America.
And we have a story that I just saw. We have the technology that Tesla and others have developed for the self-driving cars, right? However, there's a guy on trial now who was just recently arrested and charged with, I think, second-degree murder because he was in his Tesla and it was on self-drive and he ran over a biker and killed him.
Oh, man.
Now, if you're him, you could plead, well, it was the car that it was supposed to be, but as the operator of the vehicle, he's responsible and therefore he's in trouble for this. It's still not ready, as we like to say, for prime time.
Yeah.
And I think that I always want to say it's hard to predict the future when it comes to these, what's going to be and when it's going to be and how it's going to take over. Like in one sense, you could say, well, the smartphone, when it took over, it took over. Mm-hmm. So you do have those examples, but then you have other predictions like we're all going to be in flying cars, and that's still.
Well, I think, Andrew, you can tell me what you think about this, but I think as someone, because we're close in age, when I was, 5 years old, the difference in technology when I was 5 years old, which was 1999, and the difference when I was 13, which was 2007, was humongous.
Oh, yeah.
I still was listening to cassette tapes that were being sold new then, and they were still around in 2007, but we'd moved past CDs, DVDs to Blu-ray by then. And the difference in like all sorts of technological fields was astounding. And the smartphone was starting to come out, and the iPod had already, but then I compared technology today in 2024 to 8 years ago in 2016. Yeah, everything's a little bit faster, a little bit sleeker, more streamlined, but it's basically the same stuff.
Yeah.
That's funny. I would have more of that thought process from that point that you started pointing out, where you were saying you were seeing the big tech jump. I would push in my own life seeing the bigger tech jump, in my opinion, pre-internet to post-internet, or to.
So you're talking about what, 80s to 90s?
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't alive then. So.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I wonder, there's part of that is a perception issue, but I think I'm not discounting what you're saying. I think there is leaps and bounds in tech development. In one sense, your era of tech development is more been focused on stuff involving computing and interfacing with the internet.
Well, but it was also like, I remember the cool thing in my early years, 2000 onward, was cell phones were just starting to really be a big thing. And at first they were just bricks with an antenna. And then suddenly they were changing design into flip phones. And then suddenly they had cameras. And then suddenly you could, browse the web. And then suddenly, you could FaceTime with people. And suddenly they could play music. And it was every year there was a new feature that no cell phone had ever had before. And then I feel like around 2010, that kind of stopped. Everything became smartphone, and then nothing changed too much since then.
Yeah. Your reference to the brick cell phone, those existed in the 80s.
But they weren't nearly as popular as they
were. No. I guess the point I'm making is the tech kind of was introduced, and it was pretty out there. I mean, people saw it and they're like, that's cool, but it cost gobs of money.
Right.
And it wasn't ready for prime time.
Yeah.
Give it another 10, 15 years, and then suddenly the technology's developed where it's shrunk down. Batteries have gotten so much better. And so now you're starting to have people carrying around these things in their pockets.
Yeah.
I remember thinking cell phone like this and car phone like some big thing that's in your phone. And then suddenly you're walking around with Nokias. I'm like, that's
a big jump.
Right. I got to experience some of that.
Yeah.
I remember as a kid, my close family friends, a family that was friends with my family, they had in their car a car phone, and I thought it was just the coolest thing in the world. And even, the old-fashioned Get Smart shoe phone, that was still super cool. And now it's like,
whatever.
Yeah, so what?
Yeah. I mean, it's changed so much. Go ahead.
I expect that what we're going to see more of is what you said, Sterling, refinement. And on the tech side, because all the kinds of things have kind of been come up with, I guess. But I really do still think that AI, the software side, is going to be where we're going to see the most changes because of the ultimate impact on society and on the white collar jobs that we're going to see. It is going to take away a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
And there will be different jobs that will rise up. And a lot of young people are seeing that, a robot can't fix pipes.
Right. Yeah, go blue collar.
And a lot of the fear when you say it's going to take away a lot of the jobs is, that means I won't be able to put food on the table. And that is, there will be some hard times most likely where that kind of thing happens.
It'll be transitory,
but
in the correct sense of transitory.
Yes, not like Karine Jean-Pierre says. But what AI especially is going to do is it's going to make all sorts of things more efficient.
Correct.
So a lot of things as a result down the road will become much, much cheaper.
Yeah.
So the cost of living will go down, even though the jobs that used to be there won't be there anymore, and there will be different jobs in the future. Mm-hmm. So I think you have to have it in the context. Yeah, some jobs will be lost. That's not a good thing. But everything becoming cheaper, that's a great thing, because we used to, spend $20,000 on an air conditioning unit. And now we have Dubai, a city that was only possible because of air conditioning.
Yeah.
Yeah. That refinement, I think, is the key. I do think, too, that generally speaking, jobs don't disappear just suddenly overnight in an entire industry. So there's usually, and because it's hard to predict how a certain new technology coming in, all the ramifications for changes that will come from that new technology, if it's allowed to happen, what's the word I'm looking? Naturally. Organically, that's the word, yeah. Then it allows it the necessary time to, I think, most efficiently develop.
Sure.
When you try to force it to happen in certain ways, that's when you start, that's where the inability for anybody to actually see the full picture yet, they start making decisions on things and they can miss massive holes in the road, as it were. And whereas organically you'd move at a speed where you could recognize it, see it, and adjust.
So Thomas, it sounds like you're saying something totally crazy here. It sounds like what you're saying is that some big overarching organization like a government shouldn't pick winners and losers.
That's right.
That's crazy talk.
That would
Obama was smart to invest in Zalindra. Didn't go immediately bankrupt or anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that the free market, which is the best determiner for the development of new technology, because it can meet both. It works both on the individual level and it works on the social, broader communal level.
Yeah.
It benefits both. Nothing else can do that as well as free market, because as an individual, if you're rewarded for your development and your hard work and your skills, you're incentivized to lean into those.
Mm-hmm. If the government got involved in computing, we would never have invented the microprocessor, and we would have never shrunk computers down to, paper thin.
Yeah, there would have, even the concept, like you can think, where did the concept for an iPad come from? And you could point to Star Trek.
That's what I was going to point to.
I mean, somebody theorized something. They're probably not the person who put it together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who developed it.
Well, I will say devil's advocate here. NASA and the military industrial complex does actually.
Weapons really good.
Yes.
Well, but they benefit the society at large too, as a result.
Most of the stuff that we see now is downstream from that. But you see the refinement in the private sector and the open market. So just a little devil's advocate there as far as the government. But here's the difference. The government being involved in that's government stuff. That's what they are supposed to be involved in.
And it was specifically with the idea of throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
Not this is the path to go down.
But that is defense. That is the purpose of government, and it's the interests of a country. But, the technology that flows downstream from that,
Velcro and zippers and microwaves,
it comes to the society, but then is refined by the society. That is where it needs to be let free and not forced from the two ways. The government needs to stay in its lane here.
Well, I mean, to that point too, I mean, wasn't it the military that invented the internet?
Yes.
And so,
not the World Wide Web, separate thing.
Right.
Connected.
And now, I mean, once that went into the public sphere and allowed to be refined, look what it's turned into.
Indeed.
Right. So I think that, I think that the government can invest in certain things and does invest in technologies for defense, especially. But its motivation is development, get the best thing out there, keep moving. And then in order to be able to afford continually to invest in newer things, that they can sell off at certain points, technology that has been developed or basically, sell it off into the free market.
Sorry, there's workers outside our little office here.
Yep. And which then it can, refine and grow and develop into all kinds of different things like Velcro on shoes or jackets.
Zippers,
Zippers. There's a technology that I still haven't seen. I've seen it refined slightly, but has anyone seen anything that's going to truly replace the zipper yet?
No, I don't think so.
And that was invented.
Well,
how long ago?
Yeah, I don't know. Not exactly. Speaking of, though, military technology, eventually selling it off. I heard about this before Joe Rogan, but I just heard Joe Rogan talking about it too. This researcher in the 90s published papers on anti-gravity and was picked up by the U.S. military complex to research anti-gravity for the U.S. military. And she saw success. She gave talks, and then she disappeared off the map for the last decade of her life. And then separately from that, I've just seen, I can't remember the source, but I've seen some intelligence military field person saying, yeah, we looked at all the, recent UAP, UFO sightings, and there's a strong probability that's all us.
I hope so.
So, maybe the next thing we're going to get is finally get those hoverboards we were promised in 2015.
Somebody invented something that could be anti-gravity, is what you're saying.
Right. Yeah. And if that would change the world radically too.
Yeah. If you could float everywhere.
I want my hoverboard.
Flying cars, bring them on.
That'd be pretty dang cool.
And we do have jetpacks. The U.S. military uses jetpacks to get soldiers from one ship to another in convoys now. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've seen that footage.
It's kind of
amazing.
like what we saw in Dune with Harkonnen, right?
It's not nearly as cool as that,
not
but yeah.
quite, but that was pretty sweet.
It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, very cool. So why do y'all think that, we've talked a little bit about it, but why do y'all think that Gen Z is moving away from the 4-year college experience? I have a theory, but why don't y'all start?
I think it is strictly a numbers game, and they see that getting in debt and then no real prospects for a job on the other side isn't working, and they want to make money and have a good life.
I think that's probably a good chunk of it.
That's probably the majority reason too. I think it's just economics.
Yeah. My theory, I'm not discounting y'all's point, which is valid, but I think the COVID lockdowns played a big part in this as well.
Interesting.
Where you just had teachers basically say, no, we're more interested in not catching the disease when we have a 0.0 whatever chance of catching it than teaching you. And I think a lot of these young people who lived through that in schools were like, okay, well then do I really need to be in school? Because all this time I just learned everything on my computer. I can do that anyway.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point.
It's fascinating to that point, Sterling. There's also a inverse effect to that where there are also a lot of young people who feel like I can sit around and do nothing and get paid for it. And actually I'm a hero for doing that because the government says I'm a hero for doing that and have learned. So I'll be interested to see the two sides of this going forward. Thankfully, there are a lot of young people, Gen Z, going for the trades and they want to work hard. Mm-hmm. But I think there may be a factor or a faction here of young people who also feel like I should just sit around and get paid.
Well, yeah, I find that obviously not recommended. I don't recommend that, but I do find it to be a kind of a complicated problem to solve because the fact is there is, especially in America, so much excess that we do need people working to keep the lights on and the plumbing going and the luxuries we love so much continuing to be developed. But there's a very real chance that with AI, we don't need 300 million people working to do that, to put food on everyone's table every night. And so I think the solution is going to be, what are the tertiary or quaternary jobs we can come up with for people who, feel that way, who feel like I just want to sit around and do nothing, but find some way we can actually put them to use and give them a fulfilling job that also, is in their wheelhouse or whatever.
Yeah, I think the best way to make that happen is to not let people get away with sitting around doing anything. I think that when we've allowed for a society,
we've required. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Is, there's a whole generation that was required to sit around and told that they're a hero doing it.
Yeah, I see what you're saying there with the lockdowns. What I am saying in general, though, is when you have a society that has so many safety nets that, for crying out loud, we're arguing whether or not, it was argued before the Supreme Court last week, whether or not being homeless is a civil right. Mm-hmm. That would even be something that it would be considered.
Wow.
Have they given their judgment on that?
No, probably come in June.
Yeah.
So I think that generationally, most people looking at the future, the immediate future, at least of like Gen Z, what they're looking at. And a lot of them are kind of looking at a future that potentially isn't going to be as financially well off as maybe the prior generations. That's at least some people are saying that. That has some scary implications for the future. And, what we call the American dream. It's still, if you're willing to work hard, there's still a lot of money to be made. People can still do it. But we do have, to your point, Sterling, and yours, Andrew, there are too many people, not just Gen Z or millennial or X, but there's across all of them that just have decided they just don't want to work. The working, I think right now, the number working, I think this is men, 60%, 67% of working age men are basically working. Well, what are the other 33% doing?
That's a great question.
That is a problem.
Yeah.
And that's where
Mike Rowe has mentioned this very statistic, Thomas.
Yeah. And I think that's concerning because that's telling you that there is a problem of motivation, a problem of an outlook of work. And it's not like their jobs aren't out there. I mean, I still think there's something like 10 million job openings or something like that across the country right now. And so having that many people basically on the sidelines, it's not a good thing. Now, I'm sure part of that is mental illness stuff, drug addiction stuff.
I think part of it is also the jobs are frequently not worth it, especially compared to the safety net. But leaving the safety net aside, there's a lot of jobs out there that just don't really pay you enough money to live the kind of life these people have grown up with, have grown to expect, all their peers have. And so 10 million jobs that pay, $20,000 a year is not really the same as 10 million jobs that pay, all sorts of
Yeah, but
salaries.
what's happening is even those jobs that aren't paying as much, there's a segment of society that's willing to work that will do multiple jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's the segment of society who, I guess to your point, they're just saying, well, if I can't get the X amount of money, I'm not going to do anything. And I'm like, that spirit has got to die because that spirit is that's a lead weight to the rest of society. How much money are we shelling out for people who aren't working to keep them alive?
The top 50% of earners in America pay 97.7% of income tax. The bottom 50% pay the remaining 2.3%. And some huge chunk of those don't pay any at all.
I think something like 45% don't pay income tax.
Mm-hmm. Right. And, according to the amount of income tax I paid, which was not a great deal, I fall in the top 50%. And if you relied on my income taxes to run America, it's not going to work.
Yeah. And well, that's the thing is you wouldn't be having to shell out as much money if more people were working.
Right. Yeah.
Because then they would be earning money. Then they would be able to take care of themselves. Yes, not everybody's going to have a great paying job, but the expectation that you should come out of the blocks and have a great paying job and be able to buy a house within 2 years or something, that is, you're living in la la land. If you thought that has never been the case. Part of building equity is building, which for all those gamers out there that have been know what it means to grind, they should be very familiar with this concept.
Yeah. I agree with what you're saying, Thomas, but I will push back a little bit in that I think there's a lot of policies and laws and structures that exist from the past that do severely limit the success young people see as they move into these areas trying to grind and earn those money. One of those things is America used to be built on single income households.
Yeah.
And that's not possible anymore. So if you want to get married and have kids, you can do that, but both of you have to be working, which makes it way tougher to do that.
Right. I think and I'm not disagreeing with you there's been a bunch of hurdles put in people's way by the government specifically and in the name of trying to help people. Mm-hmm. Politicians are notorious for this because they feel like if they're going to be a politician doing something, they have to be doing something. Sometimes, to your point, the best time the government is the best government is when it's not doing anything.
Right.
I think that especially when it comes to economics, the best governments aren't doing anything.
Yep.
And
we're going to see in very short term, my prediction, how well that works out with Javier Milei in Argentina.
He's turning things around fast.
Yeah, he is.
So
he's a bull.
I think that unfortunately, I mean, an example to your point is the PRO Act that Congress is trying to push through, which basically would make it harder for anyone to want to be their own entrepreneur, because they'd have to become some type of like expert licensed in the field. And of course, what does it mean to get licensed? Well, you're gonna have to go through some schooling. You're gonna have to go through some, and what if you wanted to just be grow and sell flowers?
Yeah.
Suddenly you're going to have to get licensed as a professional florist.
Yeah. In Hong Kong, in its glory days, 20 years ago, 8 years ago, really, you could walk into the government building and say, I want to start a business. They'd be like, give us $10 and then you're good to go. Your business is started. That's how easy it was.
And then what in Hong Kong flourished because of that.
Right. They were one of the most wealthy cities in the world until China came in.
What you do is you incentivize work rather than incentivize the state. And unfortunately, or bureaucrats, unfortunately, our economy has been slowed because politicians have incentivized the bureaucracy with this notion that somehow its job is to control and so regulate the economy to, quote, protect people, that it's harder and harder and harder for people to make a living. They have to go, there's certain avenues where they're basically funneled through.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the antithesis of the whole freedom thing that we talk about, where allow ingenuity, allow freedom of thought, allow just personal drive and interest to move the economy along.
Yeah. And I would say I'm not super well educated on this, so call me out if you hear something I say wrong.
Sure.
But I think another thing that gets in the way and people are funneled into is unions.
Yeah.
And because, so say you're a part of a 20,000 member union, there's a statistical fact known as the Pareto distribution that says something like the top 10% of a group does about 50% of the work.
Yeah.
So 20,000 people, the top 10% is what, 2,000 people doing 50% of all that work. And then you've got 18,000 hangers on who are collecting the same paycheck, but are doing hardly any work. You hear stories, I've heard firsthand accounts of union workers who literally their job is push a button every 30 seconds or so. And that's what they do all day. And they take home a great big salary and they get all these days off. And that's not encouraging people to work hard and give their best effort and earn more money.
Right. I mean, yeah, you could say it's a warped incentive situation. I do think that, that does exist within unions. But the unions are at the lowest membership on record in America now. So the low union strength has been sapping for years.
Yeah.
Biden has trying to pump it up because for Democrats it's a political issue. It's not really an economic one. But yeah, the concept ultimately, or the principle ultimately, of valuing work and an individual work ethic, that's what made this nation's economy. And if we could get back to really seeing that again and get away from a 67% are working, 33% aren't.
Yeah.
Get closer to, 85 or, make progress in that direction. I think that we wouldn't see these tent cities of homeless on the streets.
I think on that, part of the problem is that America was built as a new country. It was built as a country that needed people to come in and tame the wilderness. Mm-hmm. So like one of my ancestors who came to South Carolina, when he arrived, he was just given 50 acres and be like, you take care of that, you tame that, it's yours. And so he was automatically a landowner of a significant amount of land. But it was a lot of hard work. But we can't keep doing that because we've mostly settled the entire country. So we have to come up with these new ways and new systems. And it's difficult because we're forging a brand new path as a nation.
I see that. I'm not trying to discount that, but I do think the frontiers that are there to tame, the internet opened up a massive frontier that certain people step through and are trying to tame. AI is another one that's going to do the same thing. So yeah, I think that it exists, but it almost always boils down to perspective and motive. If you can see it and you value work, no matter where it comes, if you learn to be good at it, you'll succeed.
Yeah.
No matter where you are.
I think that's a pretty good note to end on.
Agreed.
Yeah, so strap on that tool belt.
Yeah.
Pull yourself up with those bootstraps. All right. Well, I think unless y'all have something to add, I think that's it for us today.
Learn to weld, learn to do plumbing.
Yeah, there's some big money in welding.
Everyone's
money.
always going to want air conditioners. That's not going away. Sorry for any noises that get through the recording. There are people working outside our studio right now.
Tool belt guys.
Yeah. All right. This has been the Pop Culture Contrarian podcast with Thomas Sterling and Andrew. We're brought to you by the Patriot Post, which is the oldest conservative news digest on the web. It's right and it's free. Be sure to like and subscribe to the Patriot and to us. And tell your friends about us too. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.